Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days, having worked in law firms for a very long time. I know how crazy your days can be there. So, the idea for this webinar came from some thoughts that I had been having about focusing on the people side of the Gen AI shift. As somebody whose career was spent inside law firms supporting legal teams and training them in technology use, it's been top of mind for me since the beginning of this whole Gen AI craze, because this really is a massive change, and there are a lot of unknowns, even now, a couple of years in. And then I happened upon an article in Fast Company where Kosti Perikos, the leader of Deloitte's Global Office of Generative AI, um, had written, and there's no need for you to search for it now. We'll share the link at the end of the webinar, so if you want to take a deeper dive, you can. But that article detailed a quarterly Deloitte survey on the state of Gen AI in the enterprise, and it hit upon a lot of the thoughts that I had been having. And he discussed the need to address two critical challenges. One, building trust among workers, and then helping team members to evolve their skills. And it covered how the surveyed companies that are having a lot of success with Gen AI are doing just that, which kind of helped round out my thoughts. So here we are today, diving into strategies for engaging people, um, the ones that are closest to the work, your legal teams, to gain trust, increase engagement, and really capture your internal knowledge to leverage Gen AI technology. So that's kind of the impetus. And then another thing that I've thought a lot about is there are two types of knowledge in your organization. There is explicit knowledge, which is codified in documents and data and is heavily emphasized by kind of this current drive towards automation and AI. And as a company that manages much of this content for legal teams and others, we think this is an important piece of the puzzle, but you can't stop there. If you want to get to the really meaningful game-changing uses for this new technology, you have to tap into your tacit knowledge, the intuitive know-how and experience-based practices, the stuff that's inside the brains of your people. And that's really why bridging the trust gap is so important. And why is tacit knowledge specifically so important? That's because many estimate that the balance of knowledge in organizations skews heavily to tacit knowledge, as much as 95%. And I would say this is especially true for professional service businesses that are so heavily laden with knowledge workers like legal practices. So just to make sure everybody is, clear on kind of what the differences are. So explicit knowledge is codified in your documents and data. It answers explicit questions, and it is predictable and provides a definitive answer. And again, this is important, but you can't just stop there. So the tacit knowledge is that undocumented content because it's in the brains of your people and it's based on their mental processes. And that requires the direct experience gained by doing things multiple times. So thinking through the processes, identifying the shortcuts and the strategies in order to do them better. And so in the rush to leverage Gen AI, these types of initiatives have taken a back seat because many kind of mistakenly think that you can't automate tacit knowledge. But at NetDocuments, we think they're wrong. And our customers are actually proving it every day by combining automation, well-defined Gen AI prompts, the expertise contained in their documents, and the tacit knowledge in the brains of their legal teams. But in order to get to that point, though, you have to build the trust of those with the knowledge in the capabilities of generative AI. And so, how do successful leaders build trust? Well, first is by getting people the knowledge that they need to understand the new technology, what safe and appropriate uses are, and how to be successful using it. Next is by being transparent about what their plans are to leverage the new technology and what their expectations are for the various groups within the firm or organization. And then, of course, clear and regular communication of all of these things, as well as progress and any changes along the way. And underpinning all of these things should be a cohesive strategy to convey the why behind each initiative that's being pursued, because people will not come along with you unless they understand that. And so you need to have an AI strategy, and it needs to be tied to your overall business strategy. So building trust has a lot of facets to it. So I'd like to pause a bit and ask a few questions to get you thinking about where your firm or company is at and share the results with the rest of the attendees so that they can get an idea for where everyone else is at currently. So starting at the top, because that's so critical to defining the strategy, what level of buy-in do you have with your firm or company management? We'll give a minute for those results to come in. And then we'll share the results with everybody. So we've still got quite a few with no answer. So be sure you get in your results for the poll. Got a few. We're looking close to even. But we've still got quite a few people that have not responded. So go ahead and respond to the poll, and then we'll share the results. Looks like we've got about half responding. All right, so we are closed, and we're going to share the results with you. So we are looking at, so not good, but also not surprising, I'll say. So buy-in with firm management is at less than the biggest response there was less than 25%, so 24%. 26 to 50% was 16%, the next highest, and then 51 to 75, and only 4% at 76 to 100%. So still a good amount of skepticism with Gen AI. So not surprising there, which can make it hard to develop a top-down strategy for it. So next, thinking about the individuals in your firm or company, what level of buy-in do you have with the folks on your legal teams? So the legal team specifically, we'll give you a little bit of time to check that. So where are your folks? And it's looking pretty similar to the last one on the results thus far, but let's see if we have a change. We've still got quite a few people who have not answered, so be sure you participate in the polls. Let your voice be heard. And we've got just a little bit of time remaining until we close this poll. We've still got time to get in. All right, poll has been closed. And you'll see that the results are very similar with your legal teams, and not surprising since your legal teams are the owners of the business. So we've still got that 25% less than a quarter buy-in, 26 to 50% at 18%, and then 51 to 75%. So now thinking about your admin teams, what level of buy-in do you have with your admin teams? So next poll there. And again, we'll give you plenty of time to answer that. And we are looking pretty similarly, a little bit better. I kind of thought that might be the case, just based on what I've seen, but because we all know working with them every day, lawyers are trained to identify risks and be skeptical about everything. So not surprising that they would be, especially with a new technology. Although we are now 2 years into since the release of Gen AI. Can you believe it? All right, so for this one, we were neck and neck between the less than 25% and the 26 to 50%, and had a few folks come in the 76 to 100% categories. So that's good. Our admin people are a little bit more bought in. And so let's look at time and hopefully maybe some experience as a factor. So within your firm or organization, has the trust in generative AI grown or decreased over the past 2 years? So since we launched with OpenAI and ChatGPT in the 2 years, how have things gone for you? Have you seen it get better, get worse? Well, this is looking better or more promising, I should say. It's not better or worse. I just think it's more promising. So we'll give you just a little bit longer to answer. So as you can see, our biggest result was that 30% are saying that it has increased slightly. 11% stayed about the same. 7% decreased slightly. None that decreased greatly, so that's good, and a little bit that increased greatly. So looking good there. At least we are moving to a little bit better of thoughts about it. So finally, to level set for where your organization is at, how far have you gotten in your generative AI journey? So which of these phases would you say that you're in with the technology? I'm always curious, how far along people feel like they have gotten with things. We'll give a little bit longer for everybody to get their answers in. All right, so sharing the results. The biggest category is exploring, and that's not surprising. That is what we're seeing across the board, I think, with folks, is a lot of learning, and there's still quite a few of you that are in the learning phase, and then a lot that are in exploring, a few that have moved into creating. So kudos to you who have jumped in there with both feet. What we're seeing is a lot of people are kind of getting stuck in that exploring phase. So hopefully I can help you get past that. So we're going to continue on with the presentation at this point, and hopefully that kind of gives you an idea for where you and the people that are in similar roles to you are at with this. So I use the word journey on that last poll question intentionally. I really want you to think about this as more like a journey than a technology project, and the people in your firm or organization as your traveling companions in that journey. So I spent the first several months of this year planning a trip to Japan, and that process reminds me a lot of the generative AI journey that we're all on. Like generative AI, as much as I have traveled, Japan always seemed daunting because of the language barrier and the process for getting around. I knew that I wouldn't be able to drive in the major cities, but could I navigate their complex train and bus systems? Also, I'm not a fan of fishy fish, so would there be foods that I liked without having to resort to American fast food chains? There were some things that were similar, but like Gen AI, most of it seemed, well, completely foreign to me initially. Then this done for you 7-day trip came up through a group that I know. And so that started me down the path of planning. But then, because I committed to that trip, I had a deadline for my preparations. So I couldn't get stuck in the exploring phase. And just like my Japan trip, it is really important that you not wait to get started planning your AI journey, or you really do risk getting left behind. And just like my 13-hour flight from Dallas to Tokyo with a 15-hour time difference, Gen AI is not going to be a short leisurely journey, but it will be an important one. And so the time to get from learning and exploring to creating and then scaling needs to be fast. And why is that? Well, adoption and the learning from exploration is what's going to drive change. And as we saw, many are still learning, while others, a few, have moved to those next mile markers of evaluating, creating, and scaling. A lot kind of still in that evaluating and exploring phase. These capabilities are being developed quickly, and your organization needs to determine the best way to implement or risk being left behind in what is the biggest transformation in legal services, I would say, in our lifetime. As I mentioned, ChatGPT released in November of 2022, and in only 2 months got to 100 million users, which is unprecedented. Rapid adoption of technology in our personal lives alters our expectations around commercial use, those of both your employees and your clients. So I like to tell the story of when Blackberries were first coming out. And I was a Blackberry administrator, and the lawyers were like, you expect me to hold this calculator up to my ear and use that as a phone? And then fast forward a couple years later to when iPhones appeared on the scene and they were the cool new thing, and no one had a problem holding up an iPhone and wanted to know when were we going to be able to switch from Blackberries to iPhones. So again, this isn't a leisurely journey, just like my Japan trip versus one of many that I've taken to, say, Sedona, where I can relax and I'm comfortable. I had to step out of my comfort zone and spend the extra time to make this journey successful. And with Gen AI, that is a must. So turning specifically to legal, what about Gen AI usage in legal? When asked whether their firm is using Gen AI tools, the recently released ILTA Tech survey showed a huge jump in yeses just between this year and last year, from a mere 15% to 37%. So that's a 22% increase in 1 year. And if you look at the breakdown of answers by firm size, that gap grows even wider, between 46 and 74% answering yes in the larger firms. So even if they haven't figured out exactly how yet, larger firms clearly see the competitive advantage to be gained by leveraging Gen AI. And I'll tell you, at Net Documents, our own statistics also bear this out as well. 1 year ago, we introduced IndyMax, which is our concept for all of the AI solutions that we were planning. And we also launched Pattern Builder Max, which is our first Gen AI product. And that brought the capability of doing Gen AI prompts into Pattern Builder, our low-code workflow automation app builder. Pattern Builder Max is our most successful new product launch by a factor of 10. So 10x. We now have over 20,000 users just in a year, spread across North America, Europe, and Asia. And so far, those customers have already created over 5,000 apps, with roughly 30 new apps being built per week. And what has excited us most about this is the value that our customers are getting, because these apps are addressing really high value use cases that are specific to their own practice areas. So looking at it another way, this inflection point is the time to either drive the direction of your practice by strategic adoption and adaptation, or to react to the impacts of clients leveraging that same technology. So in scenario A, which is a win-win, firms leverage AI and automation to deliver superior client value, improved productivity, and reduced operational costs. They innovate around the journey from associate to partner, with shifts in education, team composition, and potentially even their pricing models. And firms are going to win by innovating to differentiate themselves in a crowded legal marketplace. And clients will receive higher quality advice, faster, and more efficient service. Scenario B is client-side disruption. In this scenario, legal departments and others accelerate the current trend towards shifting work to lower cost firms as a cost control measure, or they leverage AI and automation themselves to bring more work in-house without substantially growing headcount, with outside firms only being called on for final validation. And then beyond the legal department, diversification of legal services between software providers, Big Four consultants, is also going to increase the competitive pressure on law firms. And it will likely be quite painful for firms that either fail to innovate or clearly articulate the benefits. So there's always this swing between corporate clients and outside counsel. So now is an opportunity but only if you actually act upon it. In another article that I recently read by Gartner on AI strategy, they said getting more value at scale may require deep business process changes, new skill sets, roles, and organizational structures, and new ways of working. So think of that kind of three areas of focus set out in that quote: business process changes, new skill sets, roles, and organizational structures, and new ways of working. So I think that we can all agree that that is a massive amount of change to consider. And I know that's part of what the fear is. And I think we probably also know that people in general and law firms specifically are not always so great at dealing with disruptive change, especially on this massive scale. So the quote ended by saying that failing to change will likely reduce your ability to capture the opportunity that you identify. And honestly, I'd remove likely from that. Failing to change is going to reduce your success greatly. So now that we all understand how critical making this journey is, let's talk about what is entailed in moving from learning and exploring to then creating and scaling. So returning to my trip planning, having someone else to help with planning, logistics, and the language barrier that first week with that 7-day done for you trip gave me the comfort level that I needed to get started and move forward. And so addressing those very basic fears and discomforts that your people and you have is the first step. And so you do that with robust education, communication, and setting up some frameworks for knowledge sharing and safe use, and letting everybody know we're in this together and we're all learning together. So that's step one. I knew that tours are not usually how I like to travel. I seek kind of more unique experiences tailored to me. So knowing that I would have a higher comfort level after that initial tour week and that on the ground hands-on learning, then I was comfortable enough to add 7 more days to my trip and extend it. Then I began exploring options for places to go, things to see and do before creating a basic budget and itinerary for how long I wanted to stay so that I could book my flights. And so providing those opportunities for that hands-on learning and time allocated for exploring with focus training for everyone, because this is new and different. Um, this is a big change. So everybody needs to be involved, or you're never going to get your attorneys past the "this doesn't work the way I do" phrase. I'm sure everybody has heard that at some point. And so we've got to help folks get over kind of that first hump. So you need to do a certain amount of this before creating a budget and a full plan. But again, be careful so that you don't get stuck in the exploring phase. So all of this took lots of time, money, willpower, and initiative on my part. And your people are going to need help with that too. So busy legal professionals aren't just sitting around looking for things to do in their day. They are already maxed out. So solving for that, I think, is your next challenge. And management is going to have to incentivize exploration, as well as reward and celebrate successes that people have with the new technology, because nothing drives adoption like a really good success story. Also, nothing is deemed important in a law firm until it has a billing code. And so I would suggest establishing a billing code for AI innovation so that people have a place where they can track their efforts and the firm can give them credit for that. So being intentional about planning these things will help get and keep people motivated to explore and continue learning more. So that's step 3. And then I continued to learn and explore in order to build out my full travel itinerary with lots of iterations and changes along the way. And then finally, I scaled it out by making reservations, buying additional tickets, and adjusting my budget. So you're going to have to do this along the way too. But understand that you'll get better as you go along and learn more. I kept learning more about the language and the culture throughout the process. And what that did was it increased my comfort level. It allowed me to refine and improve upon my initial plan and maximize the potential for positive experiences, and helping people understand that it will take time, commitment, and effort to improve both their skills and results is step 4. And just as I had to understand that things would happen on my trip and I would need to make adjustments along the way, you have to set the expectations for how these streams are going to move. As you saw in that really wavy journey diagram, it's definitely not a straight line. And lawyers are trained to poke holes in things and prioritize the risks involved. So understanding that the technology we have today is V1, there will be improvements and iterations over time. There already have been vast improvements. The results that we're seeing with the 4.0 model versus the early models are night and day. And that's only going to continue to get better. And so just because it's V1, that can't be used as an excuse to do nothing. So step 5 is really getting those expectations aligned. This isn't going to be perfect immediately. It's going to take us time to figure this stuff out. So having everybody kind of in that proper alignment will really help as you proceed forward. So let's focus in on the emotions around Gen AI that people might be feeling for a minute that you need to get past. So recently, the Thomson Reuters Institute released their 2024 Generative AI in Professional Services report, discussing survey results from over 1,100 respondents who were screened to ensure that they were already familiar with Gen AI technology. And the participants included both those within the legal, tax, and risk departments within corporations, as well as outside law firms and tax and accounting firms, and government legal departments and courts. So most of the respondents were partners, managers or directors, general counsel, attorneys, or judges. The respondents had several emotions ranking fairly close, with hopeful and excited ranking a combined 44%, with the negative emotions of concerned and fearful coming in at a much lower combined 18%. So I would say that is probably a big shift in what we were seeing even 6 months, a year ago. Interestingly, they called out that 52% of respondents from legal departments, 49% from tax departments, and 49% from risk departments indicated positive sentiments toward the future of Gen AI in their industries. So your corporate clients may be feeling more enthusiastic than you are. And given that perception frequently becomes reality, I immediately wondered if the 35% who are hesitant could be based more on negative news stories than actual personal experiences. Fortunately, TR also thought to delve into what was behind that response. So here are the top responses. And you'll notice that fears of inaccuracy and misinformation, as well as misuse and over-reliance, are cited, along with healthy doses of surprise, skepticism, and fear of the unknown. So the report did call out that comparing between industries, government legal departments, and courts tended to take a more concerned approach. And that was a trend that was reflected throughout the survey. Court respondents, in particular, were more likely to respond that they were more concerned than any other emotion, including hesitant. And fewer court respondents indicated that they were excited. So I love this one quote. One judge explained, "I think it has the capacity to increase the efficiency of some processes and thereby possibly enhance access to justice." Great. But it has just as much potential to undermine the justice system if it is misused. So I think that that's relevant. And also the comment in the chat about judges having ethical obligations about their vendor choices. So yeah, interesting to see kind of that contrast in opinions. The report also delved into exactly why people might be excited about Gen AI. So the 41% expected increase in efficiency and productivity is a bit of a double-edged sword for those firms who bill largely by the hour, because that means it has the potential to completely upend that business model. And we've already started seeing more discussion around that as people have started actually using the tools. So to get people on board, we need to focus instead on the other answers about creating new opportunities and growth, positive transformation for the industry, and streamlining tedious work processes. Personally, many of the things that our apps do easily were the things that I dreaded when I was a paralegal. So summarizing depositions, digging through transcripts and medical records and documents for discrepancies, or even specific terms in contracts. These are the kind of things that Gen AI is proving to be excellent at handling. And so I think once people see that, that will give them a little bit more of a positive view of the technology and help get past that hesitance. And I love the comment from Carolyn that law schools are already teaching the use of AI. And so, yes, it could start to affect your ability to recruit and be competitive in getting the best candidates. So potential challenges can become real-world barriers, and lack of trust does continue to be one of the biggest to large-scale Gen AI adoption and deployment. This is especially true in legal, and part of that is because hallucination mishaps hit the national news. And all of those stories about it, being used the wrong way, that's simply because people used it for tasks that it's not well suited for. And then there was a big study about from Stanford showing less than great results with AI-assisted legal research tools. Every single story like that casts doubt on the capabilities of Gen AI overall. So we really need to get out in front of that. And we're starting to see a few more stories about success. but really getting people to focus on what task Gen AI is well suited for and why that is. So in the Deloitte survey, 72% of respondents said that trust in Gen AI has increased. And given that it's a Gen AI survey done by Deloitte, um, these respondents may be your clients because they're probably largely corporates. And so this lack of trust in the legal industry is going to be critically important to overcome so that you can go from experimentation to deployment and keep up with the progress being made in other industries. So interesting. I see a comment that some firms are restricted in use by their corporate clients. Let me say this. Brad Blickstein with the Blickstein Group, he focuses largely on corporate legal, and they release an annual survey. And in their latest survey, it showed that only 10% of their client, of the respondents, are restricting their law firm's use. So I think that's a little bit of a myth. That maybe there are a few, but now the shift is starting to show that corporate clients are wanting their law firms to be using Gen AI. So I think as corporations shift to using it, those agreements with their outside counsel are going to shift as well. So the Deloitte survey bears out the trust change with data on efforts to improve trust and the success of those who have already placed an emphasis on specifically improving trust. So in their survey, 40 to 45% of all survey respondents say that they are, to a large or very large extent, implementing specific processes to improve trust along with their Gen AI initiatives. What was interesting, though, that they called out is those in organizations that reported very high Gen AI expertise already, the focus on trust was much higher across every aspect. So they built that into their projects. So I want to look at a few other insights from the Deloitte survey about what successful leaders of AI change are doing, as well as some of my additional thoughts on how you can successfully lead your folks through this. So the first thing to consider is not focusing solely on ROI. With such a new and rapidly developing tech, you have to allow for the extra time needed before ROI is achieved. So the J curve looks at performance over time, starting with building your strategy and then that initial investment. And you'll notice that this is when you may see the dip in performance and when people might kind of lose their initial enthusiasm. This is the period of time when you're going to be creating alignment within your organization. You're going to be testing, getting things operational, skilling up your teams, and then sharing insights to improve your capabilities as you implement the new technology. But what's great is after this initial dip, then you're going to start to see the upswing as you begin to experience the ROI of your time and effort. So sharing this J curve is a really great way to give everybody realistic expectations and kind of stay on the same page as you proceed throughout your journey. As they said in the Deloitte article, many forward-thinking organizations are implementing Gen AI without specific ROI targets, as they believe they can't afford to get left behind in this critical and fast-moving market. So what value drivers should you be looking at and considering instead of ROI? So it's going to be innovation, strategic positioning, and competitive differentiation. So while not as concrete as ROI, these items are equally as important, especially with new technology. Another thing that the Deloitte survey shows is that those seeing greater success with Gen AI are providing broader access to it across their organizations. So 46% of the total survey respondents said they were providing access to just a small portion of their workforce, so 20% or less. Whereas the folks that were Gen AI experts that were further along in the process had provided access to at least 40% of their workforce. So broad access is really going to generate more and better ideas more quickly. And so they advocated horizontal scaling across your organization, in addition to your vertical or use case based scaling. And they specifically called out that this helps increase trust and create realistic expectations and supports adoption. So that brings us to another critical consideration. Who at the firm should be doing the building of your Gen AI solutions and prompts, and what skills should people be developing? So while access is important, skill development is equally as important. And so the survey asked, what skills are going to be more important across your organization. And they broke it into technology-centered and human-centered. And I think that's a helpful way of looking at what is necessary to be successful with Gen AI. A lot of times we tend to focus on the technical, but these human-centered skills, I think, are equally, if not more important. So the survey, the skills that they indicated, first of all, the most important was data analysis. And at Legal Week in January, there was a lot of talk about how having your data in order was critical to being able to leverage Gen AI. Because our customers have the majority of their expertise and intellectual property safely housed and organized within their NetDocuments DMS, they've been able to more rapidly apply generative AI solutions by leveraging their own internal expertise because they already knew their data was in one place, it was organized, it was secure, and client confidentiality was maintained. So if you're not similarly situated, that could be a critical starting point, is getting all of your data house kind of in order first. And then prompt engineering was the other tech skill that they identified. So we'll talk about that in just a bit. And then for the human-centered skills, creativity and critical thinking and problem solving topped the list. And both of these are things that lawyers are very good at. So they really need to be encouraged to lean into those skills versus their very well-honed skills for avoiding risks and being skeptical. So which brings me to this. Our chief product officer, who is a lawyer, says this a lot. It's based on one of his first experiences with ChatGPT. So he fed in the contents of part of an agreement and asked ChatGPT to give him a table of contents for it. And ChatGPT created a beautiful TOC. Unfortunately, it made up portions of the agreement that were not even included. It knew that those parts of an agreement are normally there, and so it helpfully added them in. And this is a great example of what happens when lawyers start using Gen AI. You see, specificity is really important when making requests of Gen AI. And so when Dan amended his prompt to ask for a partial TOC based only on the text he input, then his prompt was successful. So that begs the question, should all lawyers be prompt engineers? I have a lot of lawyer friends, and we have many customers who are loving working with Gen AI. But based on my social media feed and a whole lot of discussions, they are certainly not the norm. Prompt engineering is a skill. Just like any other, it requires time and commitment to master. And with lawyers' tendency to poke holes in things that aren't perfect the first time, it's going to be very frustrating and trust busting if they're not willing to commit the time and have the patience to experiment and learn the ins and outs of how to do it well before they just simply write it off as not useful. But as I said at the beginning, you need to be able to leverage that tacit knowledge within your firm and within your lawyer's brains. So then how do you get it? I think it's by pairing them up with others who do have a mindset and the patience for it, and by having those who have had successes share what they've been able to do and how they did it in order to prompt others to kind of think about similar applications in their specific practice areas. So these are decisions that are going to have to be part of your strategy. And the ABA model rule for competence, 40 states have adopted similar language to this since 2012. I modified the text just a little bit to apply it to Gen AI. And this puts the onus on attorneys to keep up with the benefits and risks of relevant technology. So this covers those attorneys that have ended up in the headlines so far because clearly they didn't understand. And so despite the obvious challenges with, kind of chatbot interfaces, everyone needs to have some basic prompting knowledge. So there will be some resources in here. And the most important takeaway here is that everybody needs to have a basic understanding of a technology. That's the very first thing towards building trust, is understanding what it can and can't do. Another key decision is going to be who the builders and evaluators are. It needs to be somebody who's close to the processes, because they have to be able to conceive of and synthesize the way we do it now with the way that we might accomplish it with Gen AI. And not everybody else has that skill set. But you have to have people close to the processes to even begin mapping them out. And so this also illustrates why customized solutions that you customize are going to be better than more generic vendor supplied ones, because you need solutions that are built specifically for your practice areas, your jurisdictions, and your clients. So document automation specialists, if you have them, training teams, business analysts, paralegals, legal assistants close to the work, they're going to be critical to helping solve these parts of the Gen AI puzzle and getting some wins without taking too many of your lawyers away from their work. But there are some tasks and strategies that only your lawyers know. That's that pesky tacit knowledge. And so really to experience the biggest benefits, you've got to get closer to the harder work. But first, they have to trust your strategy and the technology. So returning and wrapping up to my trip planning, these are those steps. So address the fears and discomforts, give them ample opportunities for hands-on learning, feedback, and time devoted to exploration. Incentivize the exploration, reward and celebrate those successes, help people understand it's going to take time, commitment, effort, practice, and then be sure that you get those expectations properly aligned. And so we're going to share the study that I referred to and several articles with you. So you will have those for reference if you want to dig a little deeper into some of that. And we'll take questions in the last few minutes that we have together. And I'm happy to stay around as long as you want, but also respectful of your time.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We did put those 4 different links for references in the chat, so you can pull the materials that you'd like to refer to from the chat. And I'll go ahead. I have a few questions that have come in, so we'll go ahead and get started with those. Okay. So actually, Michelle is asking if you could please go back to the last slide that had the steps again.
Sure. There we go.
I do want to let everyone know that Michelle has agreed to share the slides with everyone tomorrow. There'll be a PDF copy with the recording link that we send out. So if you are looking to grab some of this information, some of these slides will be in that PDF copy for you as well. Okay, and as I'm going through a couple more questions, if there are any more from the attendees, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. You can send to everyone or privately to all panelists. So, Michelle, the first question I have is, what do you think are the biggest barriers to trust with generative AI?
I think the news of mishaps that people have had and misunderstanding how it should be used. And then the other, I think, would be if someone has tried ChatGPT on their own without really understanding the technology and how to compose a prompt and had a bad experience, then lawyers will write off anything once they've had one bad experience. And so it can be a little difficult to get over that. But helping people understand what it's good at and that prompting is a skill to be developed over time with experimentation and use.
Great, thank you so much. And then the next question, are there safe ways to use confidential client documents with AI?
So you have to be sure that your vendor is not sharing inputs and outputs, which is step one. That's the basics. That's an agreement that we have with Microsoft Azure OpenAI. Um, Not moving your documents out of where they're already stored is a really important component too. And that's why we're bringing AI to your content versus you having to go and upload your content in various places, because then you've lost control of where things live, which is a big part of information governance. And then the second part of that there were some news stories a few months ago about this. We sought out an additional exclusion from Azure OpenAI that the content would not be subject to human or machine review, because many of the things that lawyers work on are the types of things that are going to trigger sensitive content language reviews, right? And so you don't want human reviewers looking at your content either. And so that's a second question that I would ask any vendor if you're looking to use your client documents.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for answering that question and for a fantastic presentation on such a relevant topic right now. We're at time, so I'm going to pass it back to you for any closing remarks before we send everyone on their way.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. I know you're all busy working in law firms, and those are busy places. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here with me.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate your time today and for giving us such a engaging presentation. We also want to say thank you to Net Documents for sponsoring today's event, and also thank all of you attendees for joining us today. We'd love to have you join us again. So if you would, visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts. And have a great day, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Joy.